I came across a group of about 20 people surrounding a large hole in the ground where a cylinder lay. The ground around it looked burnt, like there had been a sudden explosion. Two men named Henderson and Ogilvy were not there as they had gone for breakfast. There were some boys throwing stones at the cylinder, but I stopped them and they started playing a game instead. Other people in the group included a few cyclists, a gardener, a girl with a baby, a butcher and his son, and some people who usually hang around the railway station. Most people were just staring quietly at the cylinder, which looked like a big table. Some people left, and others arrived. I climbed into the hole and heard a faint noise under my feet. The top of the cylinder had stopped moving. I only realized how strange the object was when I got very close to it. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an overturned carriage or a tree blown across the road. It was only after careful examination that I noticed that the gray material it was made of was not common, and that the metal inside was an unfamiliar color. However, most people watching did not understand that it was something from outside of our planet. Although I believed the object had come from Mars, I did not think it contained any living creatures. I thought the opening might happen automatically. Even though my colleague Ogilvy disagreed, I still believed that there were people on Mars. I wondered if the object might contain manuscripts or coins, but it was too large to be sure. I was eager to see it opened, but as nothing happened, I eventually went home. Later in the afternoon, the appearance of the area around the object had changed a lot. The evening newspapers had huge headlines about the strange object. Ogilvy sent a message to all the observatories in the three kingdoms, which caused a lot of people to come to the sand pits by the Woking station. There were many bicycles and carriages, including one that looked very grand. Despite the heat of the day, many people had walked from Woking and Chertsey, and there were even some fancy-dressed ladies among the crowd. The sun was shining very brightly, and the only shade came from a few pine trees. The heather had burned out, leaving blackened ground and smoke. A candy seller sent his son to sell green apples and ginger beer. At the pit's edge, a group of men including Henderson, Ogilvy, and Stent, the astronomer royal, were working with spades and pickaxes. Stent was on top of the cylinder, which had cooled down, but he looked very hot and bothered about something. A big part of the cylinder was uncovered, but it was still partly in the ground. When Ogilvy saw me in the crowd by the pit, he asked me to come down and go see Lord Hilton, who owned the land. He said the growing crowd, especially the boys, was making it hard for them to dig and they needed help to keep people away. He also said they could hear faint sounds coming from inside the case, but they couldn't open it because it was too thick. I was happy to do what he asked and become one of the few people allowed inside the area. I couldn't find Lord Hilton at his house, but I was told he would arrive on the 6 o'clock train from London. So I went home, had some tea, and went to the station to wait for him. When I came back to the public area, the sun was going down. Some people were coming from Woking, while a few others were going back. There were many people around the pit and it looked like they were struggling. As I got closer, I heard someone shouting, "Stay back." A boy ran past me and said, "It's moving and screwing out. I don't like it. I'm going home." When I reached the crowd, I saw 200 or 300 people pushing and shoving each other. Some women were also there and they were very active. Someone yelled, "He's fallen in the pit," and others shouted, "Stay back." The crowd moved a little, and I pushed through to see what was happening. Everyone was very excited, and there was a strange humming sound coming from the pit. Ogilvy said, "Help me keep these people away. We don't know what's inside the thing." I saw a young man who worked at a store in Woking trying to climb out of the cylinder. The crowd had pushed him in. The end of the cylinder was unscrewing from the inside, and a shiny screw stuck out about 2 feet. Someone bumped into me, and I almost fell onto the screw. I turned around and the screw came out, making a loud noise as the lid of the cylinder fell to the ground. I elbowed the person behind me and looked back at the cylinder, but it was too dark to see inside. I thought I would see a man come out, maybe someone a little different from us, but still a man. Instead, I saw grayish movements inside the shadow, with 2 luminous discs like eyes, and then a little gray snake-like creature came out of the middle, followed by another one. I felt a sudden coldness and a woman behind me screamed. I turned around slightly but kept my eyes on the cylinder, which now had more tentacles coming out of it. I started to push my way back from the edge of the pit, and I saw horror on the faces of the people around me. They were all moving away, and I saw the shop workers still struggling at the edge of the pit. I felt alone and scared, and I couldn't take my eyes off the cylinder. I was frozen and staring at it. When I came back to the common, the sun was setting and there were groups of people hurrying in different directions. Some were returning home, and others were heading towards a large crowd that had gathered around a pit. As I got closer, I heard raised voices and saw a struggle happening near the pit. A young boy warned me that something was moving and screwing out of the pit, and he ran off in fear. When I reached the crowd, I saw a man trying to climb out of the pit, but he was pushed back in by the crowd. Suddenly, a cylinder began to unscrew from within, and the lid fell to the ground. Something started to move and stir inside the cylinder, and then I saw two glowing eyes and a strange gray snake-like creature emerged. The people around me became horrified and started to run away. I watched as a big gray creature, the size of a bear, emerged from the cylinder. It had dark eyes and a face with a quivering mouth that dropped saliva. The creature was covered in oily brown skin and had tentacles that moved in the air. Seeing this creature made me feel disgusted and afraid. The group of people standing around the sand pit began to disperse, slowly and reluctantly, as the sun began to set. As they made their way back towards Woking, they talked in hushed tones about the strange creature that had emerged from the cylinder and the terrifying sight of its monstrous appearance. Some speculated that it was a demon, while others believed it to be an alien invader from another planet. The narrator, still shaken by what he had witnessed, made his way back towards the railway station. As he walked, he noticed that the streets were deserted and that many of the shops were closed. It was as if the entire town had been paralyzed by fear. When he finally reached the station, he found a large crowd of people waiting on the platform. They were all hoping to catch a train out of Woking and escape the terror that had descended upon their town. The narrator managed to squeeze onto a crowded train, and as it chugged away from Woking, he looked back at the town and wondered what would become of it. As he journeyed back towards London, the narrator's mind was filled with questions. What were these creatures that had emerged from the cylinder? Where had they come from? And what did they want? He knew that he would have to find answers to these questions. And soon, if he was to have any hope of understanding and surviving this strange and terrifying invasion.